right, I think we'll get started and people can continue to come in to this. So again, my name is Kerriann Flanagan Brosky. For those of you who may not know me, I am the author of 8 books. Most of them are nonfiction books about history and local ghost stories, legends, and myths. But I did write a novel called The Medal, which I'm going to talk to you about tonight, as well as I had co-authored an Italian cookbook with Mr. Sausage in Huntington. So I have a diverse background, both very spiritual, religious, and also along the lines of the paranormal. And if you're interested in more of that end as well, I have several webinars that I'm going to be giving throughout this month. I hope this works out. This is my second webinar. This is my first one that I'm doing solo without Joe Giaquinto, who works with me on my nonfiction project. So I'm hoping there won't be any technical issues because I'm not a technical person, and it has taken me a great deal of time to figure out this whole routine with doing a virtual tour. So I would like to thank all of you for your support. There are several of you out there that I know, and I appreciate your support. For those of you who don't know me, who haven't attended any of my lectures before, welcome, and I hope you enjoy what we discussed tonight. I'm going to give you an overview about Padre Pio for those of you who may not know who he is. And then I'm going to tell you about the experiences that led me to write about my book called The Medal. So I think what we'll do, because it's hard for me to sort of run the computer screen with the questions and everything as I'm going, because I do have a couple of messages here. So I'm looking and I appreciate it. So if you could just bear with me during this time with the questions, and we will hold them off until the end. All right. So, and you're going to learn a lot tonight, but I also hope that it helps you if you're going through a hard time. I know that many people during this whole episode with COVID, there are a lot of people struggling. There have been a lot of deaths, a lot of losses this year in particular. So I'm hoping that what I tell you about tonight helps bring back your faith and gives you something to believe in. Okay, so with that being said, why don't we start off with Padre Pio. Now, Padre Pio was born in a small southern town in southern Italy called Pietrelcina. He was born on May 25th, 1887, and he died at 81 years old on September 23rd, 1968. But Padre Pio, even though he died in 1968, is still very much alive and well and performing miracles throughout the world. The numbers of followers he has at this point are in the millions. His original name was Francesco Forgione, and he was very religious as a child. His parents were very poor, and again, in the southern town, there wasn't much going on, and he prayed a lot, and that's how he spent his time. He developed a very devout relationship with the Blessed Mother and with Jesus Christ. So he decided that he wanted to become a priest, and he started his studies, believe it or not, at the age of 15. And he became a priest in 1910 at the age of 23. In 1918, while he was praying, he started to get the stigmata, which are the 5 wounds of Christ, in his hands, his feet, and his side. So I have a picture here that I could show you. You could see that. That's the stigmata on his hand. Okay, and this is what would be happening while he was performing Mass. Here's another beautiful photo of him that I personally love. Okay. Now, people would flock to him. Once he got the stigmata, people knew that he was different. The Catholic Church struggled with him for a while because they wanted to make sure that he wasn't inflicting these wounds or trying to be someone that he wasn't. So he had gone through a tremendous amount of suffering, both physical, mentally, and emotionally during his time period. He also would state that he actually had battles with the devil. When he would be in his cell, the other monks would hear his room being turned upside down. And when they would check on him, they would find him that he was sweating profusely. And he said that he was battling, these demons that were trying to get at him because he was such a very holy man. Now, his whole thing, he had a very close relationship with the Blessed Mother, with the sacrament, and he really enjoyed, giving Mass and helping people. And he believed that his sufferings, having these stigmata, was part of his purpose in life. But his health problems actually went way back to his childhood. Since he was a child, around the age of 9, he started having various issues with his health, and it lasted throughout his entire lifetime. But again, he took this as part of who he was, and that it was sent by God for the betterment of other people. People would flock to his confessionals. He had so many letters that people asked for, as far as to pray for them. And he was known as a mystic, okay? He had all different gifts. For instance, he could heal people. He had performed many miracles. He had the gift of bilocation, meaning that he can be in one location at one time and another location. So during the war, he was in Italy, and he was also seen in Germany. So he had that gift. His wounds would have a very strong fragrance of roses and a sweet smell. People would often say that they would smell these, have these scents around them, knowing that Padre Pio was with them. He also had the gift of prophecy, of reading hearts. There was one time a woman in the confessional had confessed her sins, and he had said to her, "You didn't confess all of your sins." And she said, "Yes, Father, I have." And he said, "No, you have not. I suggest you go down to the river where you drowned your baby." And she ran out of the confessional, hysterical crying. And sure enough, she did come back, and she confessed her sins and admitted that she had drowned her child. So he was able to do that. He was able to read hearts. He knew what was a part of a person's soul. And he had all of these gifts. So he basically, the Catholic Church called him more of a mystic, but he was a medium because he was able to get information from God and from the other side, which helped him to help other people during his lifetime. But again, these remarkable gifts that he had, he never felt he was worthy of them. He was very quiet. He was very poor. And again, he was deeply, deeply religious. So these wounds he carried out throughout his entire lifetime. The miracles were a whole part of what he was doing, and during these years in Pietrelcina. And there's a story of a young girl named Gemma, and her grandmother had brought her to see him. And there was so many pilgrimages of thousands of people that would go to try to be blessed by Padre Pio. But Gemma was born without pupils, okay? And obviously, if you don't have pupils, then you can't see. Well, Padre Pio told the mother and the grandmother to have faith that she would be able to see again. And she did. He cured her through the intercession of Jesus Christ and Mother Mary. And the girl went to doctors, and the doctors could not explain it all. They said it is impossible for her to see because she has no pupils. So it was definitely a miracle by Padre Pio. So there were many of these miracles, and they had to be written down, and they had to be confirmed by the Catholic Church. So after many, many years, Pope John Paul II had taken an interest in him. And what's interesting to note is that Pope John Paul II, when his name was Carol, he actually met Padre Pio. And Padre Pio had told him, again, he had the gift of prophecy. He told him that one day he was going to be the Pope, which obviously came true. So on June 16, 2002, Pope John Paul II declared Padre Pio a saint after 7 years of investigations. Over 300,000 people attended the canonization ceremony, which was held in Rome, Italy. 2 years later, on July 1st, 2004, Pope John Paul II dedicated the Padre Pio Pilgrimage Church in San Giovanni Rotondo in memory of Saint Padre Pio. And that is where he is buried. He's buried in San Giovanni Rotondo. And his body is perfectly preserved. And if you go onto the internet, you could actually see his body preserved in glass, which is another miracle proving that he is definitely a saint. It is estimated that there are more than 3,000 Padre Pio prayer groups throughout the world, and people all over have prayed to Padre Pio and have gotten amazing results and sometimes even miracles taking place. So his feast day is September 23rd, the day that he had passed away. And he's just beloved by so many people. And I had never heard of him. So getting a little bit now into my experiences with him. I had a very difficult time many years ago. My father was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a disease that he had for 16 years. He was 48 years old when he was diagnosed, and it was a very difficult time in my family's life. I came from a very loving home, very religious. My father was very spiritual, very religious. And when he got this disease at 48, it was extremely debilitating. And by the time he got to the end of his life, he was completely debilitated in a wheelchair and even unable to speak. It was very difficult to watch. I'm the oldest of 3 children, and to see your father falling down, having all kinds of accidents and things like that, it was very upsetting. I was young, I was newly married, and I could not understand at the time why God allowed this. This was my belief back then. Why did God allow such suffering when my parents were such good people and going out of their way to help others? So I really struggled with my faith, and I had gone to Catholic school. I married someone who was Catholic, whose mother actually worked for the Diocese of Rockville Center. So religion was always a part of my life. But I was having my doubts, and I was angry at God for having this happen to my father. And even though my father had struggles physically, for the most part, he kept a really good attitude throughout this whole thing. There were times, don't get me wrong, that he was definitely very stressed about his situation, or upset about it, and frustrated because he couldn't walk or things would happen. But he did have his faith in God. So one day, I don't know exactly what was going on, but it was something that was, must have been something that was very challenging happening to him. And I was at home and I was at my wit's end. I just could not stand to watch the suffering anymore. So I said, that's it. I said to my husband, I'm not going to church anymore. I was very upset. And he said, please, you have to go to church. That's all that we have to deal with as far as this is concerned. And I was too upset. And I said, no. I said, there's no such thing as miracles. Miracles don't happen anymore. And there was no reason for me to go to church. Well, he convinced me to go, my husband. And of course, that day at Mass, it was about Jesus curing the lepers. And I said, what is going on? I said, it's thrown in my face now how these miracles used to take place. And there are no miracles anymore. So I came home even more frustrated, and I said, that's it. I was denouncing God. I was denouncing my faith. I was done. Okay. Or so I thought. Well, The very next day, I guess I have two children. My oldest son was probably about 3 or 4. He was still in a stroller. And I had mentioned to you that I co-authored an Italian cookbook with Mr. Sausage. That came later, but this was in one of his locations in Huntington, his first location in this town. And I had gone into that store and I was introduced to an Italian stranger. I had never met him before. And I know the Beldan's brothers who own Mr. Sausage. And so they know about my work. I had written 2 books. I'm the author of 8 books. I'm working on my 9th. But at the time I had 2 books written about Huntington's history. And so they had told this big man about my books. And he nodded, and I didn't know what his name was. And it was at the end of the day. So when the Baldanda brothers went into the back of the kitchen for a moment, I was left with this gentleman. And he came over to me and he looked at me really closely and said, "I need to ask you a question." He said, "Do you believe in miracles?" Now, this is the God's honest truth. Okay. This is exactly how this went down. And I looked at him like he was crazy. And then I'm thinking to myself, maybe I'm crazy, because why is he saying this to me a day after I denounced miracles? And I said, well, I was a little flustered. I said, well, I believe that they used to exist, but that I don't think they exist anymore in modern day. And he said, "Have you ever heard of Padre Pio?" And I said, "No." He said, "He's the saint who bore the stigmata." And he told me a couple of facts like I just told you now. And I said, well, I don't understand why I have never heard of this man. When I went to Catholic school, I go to church on Sundays. Why have I not been told about Padre Pio? And he told me, this is before Padre Pio was a saint. And he said about the church investigating him and that they didn't want to speak about him much. So he started to tell me a little bit more. And then he said, "Give me 1 minute." And he left the store, went out to his car, and came back with a Padre Pio prayer card. He said, "You have someone in your life that's sick, don't you?" And again, I looked at him wondering how he could possibly know something like that. And I said, "Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, it's my father." He said, "I want you to start praying to Padre Pio and have faith and believe that your father will get better." So as time went on, I started to research Padre Pio, learn about him, and I started to pray to him for a miracle to cure my father of his disease. And this went on for a while. Now, there were many incidences, or coincidences, I really should say, that had happened during this time period. For instance, I went to a religious store in town to pick up a communion gift. And when I got home, there was a piece of paper in there about a healing mass that was in Bayville. And the guest speaker was a man who was cured by Padre Pio, who lived on Long Island. And it was a combination of him giving his talk about what had happened and the healing part of the mass. Now, I had, a small child at that point, so my husband was home. I couldn't go with my mother. She was busy with taking care of my father. So I went by myself, not knowing what to expect. Well, while I was there, I listened intently how this man had driven Padre Pio in his car. And it was one of the reasons why he became a saint was because of this story. And I was so blown away by what he was saying. And then afterwards, there was a healing mass. And I wasn't really sure what to expect with this. I had never been to a healing mass before. And as I was towards the back of the church, and as I watched people go up to the altar, I saw them falling to the ground. So my first response, or in my head, I'm thinking, these people are crazy. They're just being dramatic and falling on the floor as if something's happening. So I said, "I'm not going up." I was too nervous. And I said, "I'm not going up." But of course, once the usher came down the aisle and it was my row's turn to come out, I found myself that I got out, and next thing you know, I was on the line to go up for this healing. And when I got to the top, I was holding my pocketbook like this. And I said, well, I'm not going to have anything happen to me. And next thing you know, I don't remember falling, but I remember seeing the brightest light that I have ever seen. Okay. And next thing you know, the people around me, there must have been about 4 or 5 people surrounding me, started speaking in tongues, which again, I had never heard. Tongues is also another gift that Padre Pio had. So I was trying desperately to open my eyes because I saw this bright light. When I finally opened my eyes, all I saw were people's feet and shoes. Sure enough, I was laying on the altar of the church, not having any idea how I got there and how this happened to me. And there were so many different things that happened after I had attended this mass. Padre Pio would just pop up in different places in my travels, a picture of him somewhere. Someone would start talking about him. And I was praying, and my faith was improving. And I spoke to my parents about this, and I told them to pray for Padre Pio. So every time I would start having a difficult moment, if something would happen that would upset me and my faith would start to waver, I would go into Mr. Sausage, and this Italian man would miraculously appear. And it was every single time that I was feeling at my worst that he would appear. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 5 months, it could be any length of time, but he would appear, and it was as if he knew what was going on in my life. It was very, very odd. So at one point, I guess this was about 6 months after I had met him, he said to me, I have something for you, and I want you to give it to your father. And he handed me a silver Padre Pio medal that had a relic on the back of a piece of Padre Pio's actual cloth. A lot of the relics today are third-class relics that are attached to a garment of Padre Pio's. So this was considered more of, I guess, a second-class relic. Because I think the first one has to be like a nail or hair or something. Anyway, so he had given me this silver medal, and he said, give this to your father. So I went out to the jewelry store, and I purchased a silver chain for the silver medal. And I brought it to my father, and I explained about this man, that I only knew his first name. And I said, I don't know where he came from, but it seems like he knows about things that I can't explain how he knows them. And I was beginning to wonder if I was starting to go crazy and if I was grasping at straws. Over time, I realized that I wasn't, that this was all really happening, and there was reasons and why this had to occur. So every time my father went into the hospital, which was quite often, he always had the medal around his neck. And it helped me immensely to see that medal. And I would pray to Padre Pio. And again, my faith was getting better despite the things that would happen to my father. There were times that my father would get better, and the doctors had no explanation as to why. And this went on for a couple of years. And then towards the end of my father's life, we had got several calls that he was going to die and to come to the hospital because the priest was coming to give him last rites. This happened many times. It was a very difficult and challenging way to live, especially where I was at in life. I had my second son at that point. So I had, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and it was very difficult. And each time, though, my father somehow came out of death, I guess you could say. again, without an explanation. But there was a time in particular in April of 2005 that I got a phone call from my mother. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was going to die. I just had a feeling. Part of the reason why is because every time I had prayed, okay, I had always prayed for my father to be cured. And let me backtrack for a minute. There was a time that my Italian angel, as I call him, told me that I had to go see a jeweler in town. And I said, well, why should I see the jeweler? And he said, just go and tell her I sent you. Now, I'm not someone that just does what anyone tells me to do, okay? And this was at Christmas time. And I found myself at this jewelry store waiting to speak to the owner. And of course, a million people were in there shopping for Christmas, and people asked if I needed help. And I said, no, I need to speak to Janine. And I waited a good 45 minutes for Janine, and I did not even know why I was in there. So finally, she came up to me and she said, what can I do for you? And I said, well, I don't really know why I'm here. I said, a man named Johnny told me to come and speak with you. And all of a sudden, she just looked at me and then went like this and looked up as if she looked up to the heavens. And I just started to cry because I said, who is this person and what's happening to me? I then spoke to her about my dad, and she told me that it was good to pray for a miracle, but that I had to understand that sometimes miracles we get aren't always the miracles that we want or expect to have happen, and that it is God's will, and that there's a plan before we come here as to what goes on in our lifetime and before we die. So on the night that I got that phone call, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that my father was going to die this time. I had changed my prayer that weekend. I knelt down at my parish church in Huntington, St. Patrick's. I prayed at the Padre Pio statue, and I had prayed at the Divine Mercy picture that is there. And for the first time ever, I had changed my prayer and prayed to Christ to take my father, because I realized that he could not go on living the way he was. So when I had gotten the call a day or two later from my mother, and he was at home, he wasn't in the hospital, I knew that the time had come and he was going to pass. Now, I'm sure all of you have lost people that you're close with, and nothing can prepare you, no matter how often you try to prepare yourself for the loss of someone. You can't prepare for it. And I had gone and I prayed over my father. I did the chaplet of the Divine Mercy, and he could not speak. I didn't even know if he could hear me. And I remember saying to him, you must find a way to communicate with me after you have passed, and you must stay with me and help me through life. And oddly enough, at that point, when I was talking to him, praying over him, I could not see the metal around his neck. I knew it was there. He had a lot of edema. He was bundled up. But I didn't need to see it, because my faith, even though things weren't turning out the way I had hoped, my faith had been restored. And I knew that it was time for him to go. I did not know why he had to go, but I knew that he had to go. So I had said my goodbyes, and I left and came home with my husband. A couple of hours later, I got the phone call from my mother, and it was a feeling like I've never had before, to lose my father. And he died a month before his 63rd birthday. And I was devastated. The next day, I went over to my mother's house to make the funeral arrangements. But when I had spoken to her on the phone, when she called me to tell me that he had passed, I said, please, please get me the Padre Pio medal around his neck, because I would like to have it and keep it. And so the next day when I went over there, I asked his aide, Charlie, if, he had the medal. And he was very upset. His aide was very close to him, and he was very upset. And he came out and he was crying, and he had the medal in his hand, and he went to put it into my hand. And when he did, I looked at the medal in disbelief, because I could not understand what was happening. I told you that the medal was silver, okay, with a relic on the back, and I had bought a silver chain. My father wore it all those years, and the night he died, at some point during that process, the medal had turned to gold. I don't know how much you can see, because I know these Zoom cameras, it's not very sharp, but this is the actual medal. I feel like it's not sharp. I wish you could see it. This is the relic that's on the back. It's a very old medal, okay? And I could not understand how. I've heard of rosary beads turning gold, but I had never heard of a medal like this turning gold. It was a miracle. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do with this? I wore it during his wake and funeral. I wore it as a gold medal on a silver chain, which I normally would not do because it's a jewelry faux pas. And I knew that a miracle had taken place, and I didn't know why, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do with it. At the same time, my so-called Italian angel, right after my father had passed, had disappeared, completely disappeared. I didn't know where he was. No one would give me any information where he was. Little did I know that he was not around anymore. He was helping other people in other ways. And I guess about 2 years had gone by, and I went into Mr. Sausage was now in a new location in Huntington Village. And I went into the store, and again, because I know them, I went in through the back that day. So I was in the kitchen, I was behind the counter. I knew everyone who was in the store. And I said, all right, I'm going to go to the back corner of the store to go get sauce or whatever I was getting. And as I was opening the door to the freezer case, all of a sudden I had chills going down my back, because I knew that someone was standing behind me. And when I turned around, it was my angel. And I said, where have you been? And he simply said, I've been away. And I left it at that. And I said, did you hear what happened to the medal? And he said, yes. He said, I've never had one do that before. Now, this is someone that has given out countless medals. And there are so many stories of people who he has given medals to that got better or were cured from things. So I said to him, I don't understand. And he said to me, mark my words, you will be writing a book about this one day. Now, again, I'm a nonfiction writer. I write about local history, legends, ghost stories, that kind of thing, even though my books now have gotten more spiritual because of writing the medal. But at that point, I had the 2 Huntington books, and I think I was working on Ghosts of Long Island, Stories of the Paranormal. I didn't have the cookbook yet. And so I'm saying, well, how am I going to write about this? It was too personal to write it as a work of nonfiction. So I started writing it as a fictitious story. Now, this was an enormous undertaking because I was a nonfiction writer. There was a learning curve. I did everything in my power to get this right with research on how to do this. And it was very, very difficult from that point of view, from a logistical point of view of writing, the actual writing of the book. but also I had to go back to a place in my life that was very difficult to revisit. Okay. And I did it, and I had gotten a really good editor that I worked with. I had rewritten the book 3 times. It was really a tremendous labor of love. And after that, by that point, I had another book. I must have had the cookbook and maybe the second ghost book out. So I had some books behind me, traditionally published books behind me, and I had a following. I had TV experience, radio experience, the whole 9 yards. So I thought it would be easy to get an agent. And 66 letters later, I still did not have an agent. I had nothing but rejection letters. And it was very challenging for me at that point to deal with that. And my husband pushed me to continue it. It actually, I had thrown away the story. I was that disgusted. I said I went through all of this and I wanted to help the world with my story, and no one will allow me to tell it. So my husband had said to me, well, we'll have to self-publish. And I thought this was crazy. Okay. He had just started working again. He had been let go from his job in 2009. We had 2 children in Catholic school. Money was tight. And I said, it's like going backwards. I had traditionally published books, and now I was going to self-publish. And I didn't want it to look like a self-published book. And so I said, no, I wasn't going to do this. And he believes in the story that much that at night, and he, believe me, is not a writer. He is a computer guy and financial guy. And at night he would come up to my office, and little did I know he was actually putting the book together. He had researched it and had put it together. And when he had it put together in somewhat of a format, he showed it to me and he says, you still want to throw it away? And I said, well, this is crazy. I said, we don't have the money for this, and it's a huge gamble. But we did. We took every last bit we had to put this out into the world, and it started winning many awards. And the response I had gotten from people was absolutely enormous. People told me that it had changed their life, that it had brought them back to faith. I was doing several in-person lectures at monasteries and various places. People would come up to me and clutch the medal and pray over it. And so I realized over time that this was the way it was supposed to be. And that has led into another project that has been unexpected. Here is a copy of the book, by the way. I'll show you what it looks like. So you can see, and that's one of the awards that I've won. And it is, hopefully, I have a lot of hope for this in the works of being a screenplay. This has been an ongoing project for a number of years. It's been on again, off again kind of thing. But like everything else that has happened to me, my life has been divinely guided, and I have been led to certain people that are helping me to make this happen. And there is a screenplay outline put together, and we're looking for funding and different ways of getting this out there. So I do believe it will happen because, again, I did not get the miracle I had wanted. And that was the miracle of my father getting past this disease and being cured. But all of these years later, I've come to realize that that wasn't the miracle that was supposed to happen. He was supposed to die so he could set an example for others, that I could help others get through difficult times, getting through loss, getting through hardships, to try to tell people to keep the faith, that God is with you, and that our loved ones who have died are also with us at all times, and they know what's going on in our lives. And that was the miracle that really came out of my experience. As far as my angel, I am still in contact with him. And that's another thing. We have this image of what an angel is, a celestial being that flies around. And in the spirit world, yes, there are divine beings that are very high up there, but there are also sometimes angels that are brought to us in human form. And for me, it was very unlikely. This person was, you would never look at him and say, oh, he looks like an angel or behaves like an angel. But I had to trust in God. And a lot of what we have to do in life is trusting in God. I have to trust that this person was brought into my life to help me, to move the project, to possibly get this into a movie so that many more people can hear the story of this. But again, it was a very personal story and one I'm sharing with you tonight, obviously. So for the sake of the book, a lot of the book is true. I wove the story of Padre Pio throughout the book, his true story, as told through an angel, an Italian angel. And so while you're reading the book, you are learning about Padre Pio and the many miracles he performed during his lifetime. It's basically, the main character is Bethany Fitzpatrick, who is a young pastry chef, and she found herself all of a sudden at a young age owning and running a bakery in Northport, which is named after her mother. But the bakery, if you're from Long Island, is Copenhagen's bakery. And I made it into an Italian bakery filled with all kinds of Italian pastries and cannolis, which in the book, the angel has a thing for cannolis that I had added to sort of give some levity to the story. And it goes on to show Bethany's journey in dealing with her father's illness and how she had lost her faith and how difficult it was for her to manage running a business while taking care of her father. My mother is still alive and was alive during the time of my father's illness, but for the sake of the book, I had made Bethany be very alone, that her mother had passed. So in the book, The Medal, you go through her journey of faith and her a time period where she crashed and that she felt that she could not go on anymore. And in steps Jimmy, who is the angel in the book, and he helps her to get through. So there are a lot of things that are true in the book, certain incidences and things like that. Most of the characters, loosely based on people in my life, and then there are some characters that were new, and the screenplay version is a little different, like always happens as far as with books and movies. But again, the goal of all of this was to get the word out about Padre Pio and to get the word out for others to keep the faith no matter what happens. We're living through very trying times now. This past year in particular, I had a lot of, my mother had a lot of health issues the past 2 years, and she was in the hospital for 7 months. She went in for heart surgery on December 29th of last year, 2019, and my sister and I brought her home on July 10th of this year. We thought she was going to be coming out. She was in a cardiothoracic unit in confinement for months on a ventilator. And just when she had gotten better in the beginning of March, they moved her to a step-down unit. And sure enough, she got coronavirus. Again, I had to rely on my faith. The doctor told me that her chances of survival were very slim under her condition. And I refused to believe that. And I said to Padre Pio, I said, I get it. My father wasn't supposed to be cured. I said, but I need you to help me with this one. And against all odds, my mother came out and was walking and is now at home. And she still needs prayers. interesting how the screen, this happened to me once before when I was talking about these things, that the light flash, there's no reason for there to be a light flash in here. So maybe Padre Pio and the angels are trying to tell us all something. But my mother's doing well. She still has some obstacles to overcome. But this is what it's all about. This is what life is all about. This is things that we have to go through. And all I can say is that it's important to appreciate what you have when you have it, and just to keep the faith. I hope that my journey can inspire other people to move on, to get past whatever problems they may have and difficulties, and just to feel that they're not alone, especially with caretakers. Caretakers often feel like they're very alone because everyone else, it appears, everyone's running around having a wonderful time, and you're seeing and dealing with very horrific things, things that you never thought you would be capable of handling. You find yourself having to handle these situations, and it makes you stronger. But there were many times this past year when I was in the hospital with my mom that I knew I wasn't alone, that I could feel the presence of Padre Pio and my dad helping along the way. So that's the story of the medal. That's the story of Padre Pio, and there's still so much more to learn. I am offering now, the book is available on Amazon, of course. It's in Book Review in Huntington and various other places, but I am offering all of my books for sale through my website now at KerriannFlanaganBrosky.com. And if you're interested in getting copies of the medal specifically, I will personalize them, write them to anyone you want, and I will sign them and ship them out to you with free shipping. So I'm offering free shipping until the end of the year. So I hope that it helps you, by reading the book, by knowing the story, and do some research on your own. Google Padre Pio. There's many books about his life. And there's documentaries and some really good shows out there about it. And say some prayers that we could get this movie going. So that would be really a wonderful thing to really help get the word out on all of this. So at this point, if I could figure out how to work everything on the computer here, I will take some questions. I think we have one here. So let me see. Okay, I have one question here. What was the best part of writing the medal? Let's see. The best part about writing the medal, I guess, was to be able to get what I had lived through out in the world. It was almost like a cleansing feeling to be able to release this, I guess. So that's like an internal, benefit of what I had from writing it. The other thing that I liked about writing it was that I could change up the characters. And I had mentioned the part about the angel in the book liking cannolis. And I needed to add levity because, it's a heavy book in certain areas. And I had him have this fetish for Bethany's cannolis, and he was always eating them. And so it was kind of fun to develop that. There's a really fun scene in the book with Bethany teaching Jimmy how to fill a cannoli. And he's a big, tough guy, but yet he's very childlike in a couple of the scenes, and that was one of them. So I enjoyed being able to change the characters and put some creativity into it because it was obviously something different than I was doing before with writing nonfiction. Okay, another question. What was the most challenging part of writing my book? Everything. Everything was challenging. There was not one single moment in the whole process that was not difficult. First and foremost, I had to revisit my experiences, which was hard. Even to this day, if I should read the end of the book, I'm crying about it. So that part was hard. But the whole process of trying to get it out into the world, it was difficult. It was heartbreaking and heart wrenching, are probably the best ways to describe it. So it was just hard, you know. But I'm glad I did things the way I did it, and you know. But it took a while. It took a while to get past a lot of these things. So. All right, another question. All right, let me, okay. Can I personalize the books? Most definitely. When you order the books through my website, there's a spot that says that you could give instructions. So you could put, you know, the person's name, if you want me to write Merry Christmas, Happy Birthday, that kind of thing. And if you can't fit all of it, then you can send me an email. And I can, you know, when I get the orders, I have your email address. So if I have a question, I will get in touch with you as well, but I can get them out, you know, as soon as possible, and I will let you know when I ship them out. So yes, I can personalize the books. Another question, how did you come up with the characters? Are they all real? So as I mentioned, the character of Bethany, she was, you know, a made up character, but her character was basically a combination of myself and my mother and what we had both, you know, gone through. I mean, I was married at the time, so I was not living at home anymore, although my father was sick before I had gotten married. But based on what I saw my mother go through and what she had, you know, witnessed, I had included that along with my own feelings and what I went through. So that's how Bethany came to be. The aide in the book, Rob, is based off of my father's real aide, Charlie. The angel is based off of my angel. There's someone in the book that Bethany is very close to who is like the bakery manager, Allison. She is a made-up character. I'm trying to think who else. But most of the characters are loosely based on, you know, people that were part of my life. Okay, another question here. Let me get caught up here. Answer this. Okay, the best part, writing the letter, personalize the books. Again, thank you for bearing with me, because it's not easy to do multiple things, at least not for me anyway. I'm not a technical person. So, okay, this question, are your books on audio? Not at this time. I would like them to be eventually. That would be great. That would be another next step. So we will see what happens in the future. If they do turn into an audiobook, I will let you know. For those of you who are interested in receiving my monthly newsletter, if you go onto my website, again, that's KerriannFlanaganBrosky.com. You could sign up for the monthly email, and that will tell you things about if there's something coming up with the movie, other books. You'll get invitations to things, and I will also let you know if there was an audiobook. You'd find out through the newsletter. Okay, what made me pick Copenhagen Bakery? Well, because my love is also, besides being an author and a writer, is very food oriented. I was also a food writer for Edible Long Island for 5 years. And I did a lot of cooking with my mother. So if I hadn't become an author, and if my degree is actually in photography, if I hadn't become those two things, I probably would have gone to culinary school. So for the sake of the book, and this sort of goes with the other question of, you know, what did I enjoy about them at all? I enjoyed the fact that I could create these characters and make them different from myself. So I wanted Bethany to be in the food industry, and I said, why don't I make her a pastry chef? And I live in Huntington, and I didn't want anything that was close to me here. I wanted the book to be set with close by, but not where I live. So I picked Northport. And then I said, well, what better place than Copenhagen? So I had it in my mind that, you know, I wanted her to be near the water and to be able to look out and contemplate on days that she was upset. And I thought that Copenhagen was a great source for that. So basically, the bakery is Copenhagen, but it's more of an Italian bakery, which was based off of Fiorella Dolce Bakery in Huntington. And for my book trailer, I had actually filmed a scene with cannoli making at Fiorella Dolce. So it's a combination of the two, but it's definitely set in Copenhagen. And when the book first came out, we did a book signing there, and the owners were thrilled. So that was a lot of fun. All right, let me see if there's any other questions here. Okay, got that one. What is involved with a screenplay? Well, that's a whole other new area in my life. I've been working with someone that has helped me with this, and I actually have written the screenplay outline, and I'm hoping to be working with the screenplay writer to put it into a format sooner than later. So we will see how that goes. So again, it was something else that I had to learn on my end, and there are certain things that you have to have met when you're writing a screenplay as opposed to a book. Because with a book, I understand it now all these years when I say, oh, how come the movie is different than the book? There's a reason for that, because there has to be a certain flow and a certain way of doing things. So it is involved, and it's now waiting for next steps. So hopefully we will see something come about soon with that. All right. Next question. Can you give us a hint on some changes from the book for the movie? Well, one thing that people said to me in reading the book, they said, how come Bethany didn't have a love interest? For the sake of the book, I wanted the focus to really be on her struggles and her relationship with her father and meeting the angel and that kind of thing. And I thought that putting a love interest in it would somehow take away from her experience. I realized that, you know, in a screenplay, it would be important to have that aspect. So I don't want to give away too many details because, again, in case it doesn't work exactly this way, but for what I have as of now, she does have a love interest that has gone astray, and then possibly someone else coming back into it. So I didn't make it as a big portion of the book, but there was definitely some changes in that area. So, you know, we just changed things up a little bit. Okay. Oh, thank you. I have a message from Jeannie saying I was great tonight, and thank you. Another question here. Have I been in touch with the angel in the past year? And if so, does he have any further details about his connection with Padre Pio? Yes, I'm in constant touch with my angel, and he is still very devoted to Padre Pio, and he's not living on Long Island right now, but where he is helping others to understand Padre Pio and to get their faith back. So he is still working at that. And the last question, what is your next book about? You mentioned Ninth. I am currently working on Haunted Long Island Mysteries, and it will be out next fall. Thank God it's not this year with the way things have gone. So that will be number 9. I also have a children's book that I didn't write, but it's my material. I was asked by my publisher, they're starting a children's line with the History Press in Arcadia. and they took 6 of the best-selling nonfiction books in their Haunted America series and created, asked if I would work with a children's book writer. And so Rachel Kempster Barry, who writes for middle grade fiction, took 16 of my stories from historic haunts of Long Island and made a middle grade fiction book, and I got to proof it. And I have copies of that book to sell as well. So you could also purchase that through the website. So that is an adaptation from one of my books. So there's still information about me in the back, and I'm on the front cover as well. But my main adult book is Haunted Long Island Mysteries, which is another 18 stories of places presumably haunted on Long Island, with a heavy emphasis on Long Island's history. A question I get, in case any of you are thinking about this, people say, how do I justify being a devout Catholic with my, as well as my beliefs in things like mediumship and the paranormal. And I had a priest, and in fact, I quoted this in the medal, a Catholic priest that I had grown up with, that was actually a friend of my father's, that he grew up with, I should say, but he was my pastor when I was a child. And I had remembered going to confession, and I'll admit I was sort of the goody two-shoes child that didn't really do much wrong. And I went face to face and told him I was a bad Catholic. And he said, "Kerriann, why are you a bad Catholic?" And he was trying not to laugh. And I said, "Well, I was reading Shirley MacLaine." And I said, "And that's against the church's teachings." And he smiled at me and he said, "The Catholic Church is like a box." And he said, "It's up to the church to teach you what's inside the box. And it's up to you to go outside of the box and find your spiritual path." And that is exactly what I have done. And that's how I'm able to balance both types of books that I work on. And as I mentioned, as many as of the religious experiences as I've had a lot of spiritual experiences. And believe it or not, the ghost books that I've written, Ghosts of Long Island, Historic Haunts of Long Island, they have gotten more spiritual over the years. And those books have also helped people get past certain things, because they realize, again, that our loved ones are not that far away and that communication with them is possible. And if you'd like to know more about things like that, check out the rest of my webinars. Tomorrow I'll be with Joe Giaquinto tomorrow night, discussing the difference between mediums and psychics and understanding all of what's involved with that. The following week, I have a webinar with Joe again on signs and communication from the other side, and I'll be giving examples of communication that I've had besides what I've had with, Padre Pio and my father. And then there's some other discussions this month on historic haunts of Long Island, another one of my books, Historic Crimes of Long Island. Then we have towards Halloween, some children's programs and some spookier ghost stories. So do check out the list on the events if you're interested in that as well. So let me see if there's anything else. Okay, so thank you for your message there, that people are interested in the next webinar. And just want to make sure there's no other questions. I think I got them all. Okay. I just want to really thank all of you. It's very difficult for me to sit here and look at just this camera. I have to be honest with you. I really love doing in-person presentations, and usually this time of year, I'm doing anywhere from 16 to 18 live, presentations and book signings. So when the whole thing of COVID started to happen, it was very challenging. Again, I told you I'm not a technical person. I've been working with my web designer and trying to figure out how to do all of this and make this happen. Because again, I'm considered small business and I've lost a lot of money from not having my in-person events. So I just want to thank you all for taking the time out, to listen to me tonight, to spend your hour with me. And I just hope that you all got something from it and that I could make all of your day a little bit brighter because of telling you about my story. And pray to Padre Pio. So I will leave you with this. This is one of his most famous quotes, and I have it all around my house. Padre Pio said, "Pray, hope, and don't worry. Trust in the infinite goodness of Almighty God." So I'm going to leave you with that. And thank you, Francesca. I see a note. Thank you for inspiring us with your precious gift of faith and sharing your miraculous experiences with us. Thank you for that. And thank you all. And I wish I could see you. I really do. But you're inspiring me anyway, just by being there. I can see your names on the side. So hopefully you'll attend some other webinars, and I wish you all a very good night. Thank you. Bye, everyone.